Women have a 2 to 3 times higher risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and that is compared to men. Several factors are involved in explaining the difference. Both psychological and biological explanations have been suggested. PTSD is about 10 to 12% higher in women and 5 to 6% higher in men. There are similar differences between the sexes for disorders such as major depression and anxiety disorders. Men and women both experience different types of trauma, both in private life and at work, with women being exposed to more high-impact trauma than men at a younger age. Trauma early in the life has more impact, especially when it involves type 2 trauma, interfering with neurobiological development and personality. Traumatic stress affects different areas of the brains of boys and girls at different ages. Trauma and PTSD, traumatic experiences are one of those things that massively affects our mood, our depressive cycles, our anxiety, and how we hold ourselves in everyday life. There are many different ways that you can release your trauma and really allow it to flow through you. One of the best ways that I've found, being a male myself who has dealt with very severe traumatic experiences from different physical and sexual abuse, some of the best ways that I've found to release trauma and really allow my life to continue as a normal person's would is embracing the trauma and allowing it to become part of who you are, because essentially it is part of who you are and you're never going to be able to change that. You're never going to be able to get rid of that. It's always going to be a part of who you are and a part of who you're going to be and a part of who you were. And no matter how many self-healing journeys you go on, and no matter how many times you try and change yourself and try and be a different person and try and be somebody better than the person that you were, this is always going to be with you. It's attached to you internally, and there's so many different wonderful things that you can do to process this trauma, and there's so many different things that you can do to deal with this trauma, but it's always going to be there. And I feel until you embrace that fact of it's always going to be there, it's always going to be part of me. Some people never sort of get over that idea that it's always going to be there, it's always going to be part of who you are and part of what brought you to the place that you're in. These different experiences and these different thoughts can lead to a whole host of different problems. Probably the number one being anxiety, depression, and stress. They're the three most common, and they're the three most likely to cause you different problems in terms of sleeping, in terms of your relationship to yourself. And having a positive relationship to yourself is going to be the key determining factor of how you then have a positive relationship with your partner, with your friends, with your family. There's so many different aspects to trauma, to dealing with these things and actually being able to cope with what you've been through and where you're going to go and what you're going to do and who you're going to be able to do it with. Thankfully, I think I found a load of different things that you can do for this stuff and for this stuff to actually work and actually be able to heal from trauma. I personally believe we are able to heal quite dramatically from these different things. Maybe not to 100%, but to 80-90% you can get all the way there if you persist hard enough and if you keep showing up for yourself day by day. You sort of hit a wall at some point and enough is enough, and I'm fed up of being fed up, and you don't want to be where you were, and it gets to a certain point where you need to make sure that you do the things that you need to do. There's a whole host of different things that genuinely actually work to be able to heal your trauma, and I think that those are probably bubbled down to 5 things. If you want to heal from your trauma, then you need to consider 5 key aspects. Now, personally, as somebody who has dealt with a lot of trauma in my personal life, somebody who's personally dealt with many different kinds of abuse in my younger years, I have found these 5 key techniques to be groundbreakingly fundamental for my personal growth and development. And so they are talking with someone, whether it be a friend or a family member, whether it be to yourself, whether it be on video, whether it be with a counsellor or a therapist. Talking and physically allowing the words to pass your mouth is something that's been extremely beneficial. I've done all of the above. I've spoken to counsellors, I've spoken to therapists, I've spoken to a variety of different people to be able to really deal with the things that I know I need to deal with and allow that energy to flow through me rather than just sit inside me. talking to someone. To deal with the stress and anxiety side of things and to deal with the depression as well, I found doing something physical really helps in that realm. If you don't take care of the mind, the body will never be right. If you don't take care of the body, the mind will never be right. So doing some kind of physical activity, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's going for a run, whether it's going for a cycle, no matter what it is you choose to do something to allow those energy and allow that feeling, to allow that stress and anxiety to just melt away in the physical realm. Journaling is another massive one. Journaling, again, it's another form of speaking, because again, you're allowing those thoughts and you're allowing those feelings to flow through you in a different realm. So rather than saying about the things that have happened to you, about to a therapist or a counselor or a friend or a family member, then you're allowing that energy to come out in a different way. I found the combination of both extremely beneficial. Talking with someone and writing things down, journaling, have been both extremely beneficial things in my life that have really helped me heal from the different problems that I've had. Meditation is another one. So allowing your time so you don't have to sit there and go but allowing yourself time to sit with your own thoughts, your own feelings and your own emotions, to ask yourself the questions: why am I feeling this way? Why am I allowing these thoughts and feelings to come to the surface at certain times? Understand, it's allowing yourself to understand what your triggers are, what your emotional problems are, and what gets you riled up, what gets you annoyed, what gets you in the state of being in fight or flight or freeze or flop, and why then essentially are you in that mode? How can you then try and bring yourself out of that high adrenaline mode? How can you reduce your stress and anxiety? How can you reduce your adrenaline? And then essentially, how can you come back to a homeostasis mode? And how can you allow yourself to really relax and be in that sort of situation and where you can be calm, cool and collected? And the last thing, and probably the biggest thing, is breathing. Now, the reason I think breathing is the biggest thing is because it's been documented from a scientific capacity in so many different realms. Most people do not know how to breathe properly, and when they do breathe properly, it's very hard to fill up your lungs properly. From there, it's very hard to do the two different types of breathing. You've got lymphatic breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, and being able to do both of those breathings at the same time, it is hard. It is a skill. It's something that I teach to my clients in the gym. It's not easy. Being able to do both is extremely hard, actually, and most people don't understand the two different types of breathing or the multiple different types of breathing and how this can then affect your stress and anxiety. I find it massively beneficial for stress and anxiety. The more that you really sit down and be, again, cool, calm and collected, and especially at night time, I find this most beneficial at night time, because when you are led there at night and your mind is wandering around and racing around and thinking about all the things it probably shouldn't be thinking about, and it's thinking about the things that really don't make you very happy, and that really then it can trigger you, and then you get more annoyed that you're not sleeping because you're all stressed and you can start sweating. If you get up and out of bed and sit down on the floor and be grounded, and then go through some real deep breathing techniques, that's so beneficial. It really allows you to feel your heartbeat, really get connected with your body, really get connected with all the problems you've got going on, and really allow that stress and anxiety to really cool down and be a lot better, essentially, so that when you do cool down, you're able to really, again, keep cool, calm and collected, and then you're allowed, your heart rate comes back down, and then rather than thinking about all the things that are running rampant in your head, you're thinking about your heart rate, you're thinking about peace, you're not as stressed, you're not as anxious. Every single client I've ever had, and for myself and for every single friend and family member I've ever had, this has worked wonders on. Being able to do this every single day, following a Wim Hof guided breathing session, has dramatically changed everybody's lives. It's been absolutely incredible, and it's something that I do highly recommend to you guys to do. So yeah, hands down, the number one thing to reduce your stress is breathing. 74% of adults in the UK report stress to the point where they feel like they can't cope. And I would classify this as a stress epidemic, especially in this day and age, with prices going through the roof for everything, the cost of living going up, trauma, PTSD on the rise. It's something that most people deal with. If you talk to at least a handful of friends and you ask them if they're stressed about anything in their lives, they're most likely going to say yes. And this is only getting worse. And that's because it's the younger generation who are dealing with all of these problems. They're dealing with all of the major stress and anxiety that we actually have going on. Women aged 16 to 24 are most likely to screen positive for PTSD, some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, while over 5% of the UK population actually have some kind of PTSD. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but it's a lot more than you think it would be, and this is just going off some really rough statistics. I've spoken to some different charities and different trauma institutions, and they are seeing the prevalence, especially in men, it going on the rise massively with trauma and PTSD. And so if trauma and PTSD is on the rise and you don't know anything about it, then we aren't speaking about it enough. And so if that's happening, then ask your friends, ask your family about it. The more that we talk about it, the less it holds some kind of horrible taboo subject where we shouldn't talk about it and we shouldn't really think about these things. There's not much you have to do in life to be able to really deal with your stress and anxiety. There's quite a lot you've got to do to deal with trauma, I find. It really depends on what your stress and anxiety is about. If you've got stress and anxiety in your everyday life just normally, it's such a highly linked subject to trauma, and this is the thing that most people don't quite understand. And another thing is people look at trauma and they think, oh my god, I have to have been abused in some description, or I would have had to have been violated. That's not even necessarily the truth. If you look at the ACE score, ACE, Adverse Childhood Experience Test, there's, I believe, 9 questions, and some of those questions you wouldn't even think are to do with trauma, but actually they are. Like, have you been through a divorce as a child? You know, it's a quite normal going stuff. Like, I've never met anybody that's got a 0 on the ACE score, and that is probably down to what society is these days, and those issues and modern society is only making things worse. And so that's probably why you've got some kind of trauma, so that's probably why you've got some kind of stress and anxiety, because of that trauma that you've been through that you didn't even know that you went through. These things don't just happen randomly. You aren't just born anxious, you aren't just born depressed. As much as people would like to think so, I don't think that's the case. And it's people who want to feel like, and well, let's just take the argument, if you are born stressed, or you are born depressed, or you are born anxious, then wouldn't you want to not be like that? You've been like that your entire life. Wouldn't you do everything you possibly could to change and be different in some kind of realm? Because there's, like I say, there's 5 key things that you can do today that can change that I went over earlier in the video. You can do those 5 things, you can implement those things like today, straight away, and you can probably instantaneously feel better. But we'd like to, in this society, feel sorry for ourselves. And is that really the right way to go about it? Taking action and making sure that you do the right things, not even for yourself, but for your family and for your friends and for your loved ones, for everybody else around you who wants you to do better and wants you to thrive and wants you to be able to live the life that you deserve to live. And that all comes from within. You have to want to do these things. And no matter how stressed or how anxious or how much anxiety or how depressed or how much trauma you've got going on, then you're able to deal with these things. You are able to deal with these things. You're able to move past them. It's just knowing what to do, how to do it, and essentially being confident enough to know that you can. Do you think you can? Honestly, I've met so many people who really just live in the idea that, no, this is it, this is who I'm going to be forever. Are you comfortable where you are? And if you are comfortable where you are, comment, like this video. If you're not comfortable where you are, then comment why you're not comfortable, and let's see if somebody can help you. There's so many different things that work for so many different people, that it will allow you to be, the best version of yourself, and you just have to want to do it. So comment your thoughts down below, share this with somebody who you think might be beneficial for, and I shall see you guys in the next one.